My name is Josh Azevedo. I will start just to give you a little bit about me and how I ended up here. I had a pretty severe drug and alcohol problem as a teenager. I also sobered up as a teenager, and that's something that can be very difficult to do, not only for the teenager but for the parents, and it's tough on the whole family. So that being the case, I was really interested in not only working with other teenagers, but in working with parents and families, because the problem that I had took such a toll on my family as a whole. So, and as we went through that together and learned that, I got really interested in the field, and I started in the field very young. I've worked in multiple different capacities. I've been in large hospital settings, residential, intensive outpatient. I've worked with support groups. And anything that I share with you tonight will be from what I've seen after 20 years in the field. I've worked with thousands of families, and I do primarily see it as working with the family, not just the adolescent. When you're counseling somebody, particularly in that age group, the family is as critical a part of the whole thing as the teenager is. They always are. So I'm going to share with you some of how I think that kids end up on drugs, what happens for them to get there, some of the things that keep them on drugs, what it is that they're gaining from it, and how it progresses over time into a real problem, and some of the things that can be done to create an intervention, and what you can do about it if you do have somebody that's going in that direction. So that's the main things I want you to leave here tonight with, is to know how they get on drugs, what they get out of it when they're there, something to do to intervene, and then I'll answer any questions that I can. I do like to do a lot of question and answer. If you want me to clarify something, please feel free to stop me, and I'll clarify as much as I can, and we can have a discussion. There are certain things that I want to cover, but I'm not real rigid to it, so let me know. I'm going to start with just the basics of how kids get on drugs. One of the first questions we get asked a lot of times in treatment is, how did this happen? How did my kid get on drugs? And it's the old answer is the new answer that was decades ago. It doesn't really happen any differently than it ever has. Kids get on drugs because of peer pressure. They get on drugs because there's other kids around them that are doing drugs. There are exceptions to that, but that is the general rule. There are a few. I've met very few in my entire career that started because a parent started them on it, or because, it's friends. And so one of the first things that we always try to attend is, let's talk about being a teenager a little bit and what it is that they're going through and experiencing. Adolescence is a tough time of life. All of you know that. You've experienced it. You've been through it. You're going through all these changes, from hormonal, your body, your social group, the way that you're relating to your parents is changing. This is for the first time you're starting to look outside of the home for some approval, that need to fit in, to feel a part of. Is there a little bit of a need to rebel, to have some more independence? And you don't know where that goes. You're being told regularly, you're not an adult, you can't do this, this, and this, you're not allowed these powers. But at the same time, it's not a kid, act like a grown-up. It's a very in-between time during those years, and there's a lot going on, and you're all of a sudden noticing things about yourself changing as you're growing up and going, I bump into cabinets because I don't fit in my body. I can't talk to anybody of the opposite sex. We used to be able to all play in the playground together, and now if I get around somebody of the opposite sex, all these things are happening that we don't understand to us. And it's a time where there's a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of discomfort that is normal, that everybody goes through. It's part of growing up. And part of what's happened is they're driven heavily by their peers. And we talk a lot about this with the parents that we work with, because it's really important. One of the first lessons that we ask parents to learn about meeting a teenager where they're at and speaking in a language they can understand is, keep in mind that you might be able to relate to them, but they don't relate to you. So if you're speaking to them in adult terms and from an adult place, they're not going to get that. If you go, peer pressure is not that important, they're going to go, right, Dad, right, Mom. They can't help but feel that way when they show up to school the next day and everybody's got, the new kind of pants, whatever it is that's cool, and they go, I don't have those pants. They're going to notice, no matter what you said to them. And they go, somehow I got the wrong pants, and I'm here, and what do I do? That is the typical feeling of a teenager. So it sets up to have some normal discomfort, to go through some times where you're not real sure of who you are, you're not an adult yet, some we'll call it normal low self-esteem. We're not talking about I hate myself, I can't stand to look at myself in the mirror, but some I don't know where I really stand. So this is going on this time of life. At the same time, there's this desire to fit in with the peers. And also, what else is important to teenagers? Fun is very important to teenagers. It has huge, with most of them, particularly ones that get into drugs, it has huge value. Is how much fun is this? Did I get a little bit of a rush from it? It's what's the payoff in what I'm about to do? And you add in independence, peers, fun. These things all have huge trade. And then you add the need for adult experience. Who's the coolest kid in the playground usually? The one with the most adult experience. That's what creates the incentive to lie, to start telling people, well, I've had sex. Remember on the playground, and guys are lying about it by the time they're 12, It's who has the adult experiences that they can say, well, that makes me the authority. Because when we're all 12, 13, 14, if I have a few adult experiences that you don't have, I'm now the authority. And I'm now the authority more so a lot of times, and parents like to hear this sometimes, but it's true, than mom and dad. Because teenagers will start to take this stuff in, and they're finding things, and they're listening to them from a peer group, and it's starting to catch up to mom and the sun rose and set on mom and dad for many, many years, and now you're starting to take it outside of the home, and I don't know so much anymore. Billy and Johnny, they're experts. And have you seen what they're saying on Facebook? This is how it really is. You're old, you're antiquated, you don't know what you're talking about, so I have to listen to you to some degree, but I'm also going to listen to Billy and see what he has to say about what's happening and what's cool and what isn't cool. So these things start to get taken into account, and you're going through all this. This is important. You're uncomfortable. So what do you want to do? You want to be comfortable. The last thing you want to do is be humiliated by any degree. Some of you went through this, some of you did not, depending on how much self-esteem you had. But for a lot of young adolescents, 7th, 8th grade. That's the typical time in Arizona that kids pick up drugs and alcohol for the first time. They're starting to pick up steam a lot of times by freshman, sophomore year. Whenever we go into high schools to speak, we usually pick at the sophomore year, because that's usually where it's starting to really escalate. And that's where we'll try to get them to get some intervention and stuff. But, so sorry I got off a little bit there. So as this is all happening, what I'm getting at is you're avoiding this humiliation on a day-to-day basis, because this was this way decades ago, but it's worse now. If I go to school and I say the wrong thing and I put my foot in my mouth and I don't have the right clothes and all this, it could affect my entire high school career and my image for the rest of the time. Nobody will forget. And I remember feeling that way decades ago as a teenager. Now they deal with it in 10 times what we did, because if you do anything wrong, it'll be put on social media and it'll stay there for the rest of your life. You make a big mistake, everybody's going to know, and there's going to be pictures, evidence. For us growing up at the time that we did, there was not going to be evidence. The stupid things we did as teenagers were not in public in the same way. And a rumor was different than confirmation, right? So it can be a series of trying to avoid humiliation on a day-to-day basis. So this is a tough thing to navigate. And this is tough for all teenagers, I believe, and I think it's tougher now than it's ever been. So they're prone already to having some self-esteem issues. And again, we're not talking about the worst, in the basement self-esteem, but I'm a little unsure of myself and who I am. So add that to, now we have, I'm going to start with the societal and then go to the peer pressure. The general societal expectation these days, even from a lot of parents, is that you're going to party in high school or college. It's coming at some point. A lot of kids we work with heard their parents talk about it. They hear their parents talk about their college years or what they went through, or we partied, or we drank, and they hear it and they see it like it's a rite of passage. And we don't have as many rites of passage as we once did in society. What defines, where does it delineate that you're a man or a woman? Is it that you turn 18? What experiences decide that? But a lot of teenagers see it like, well, that's part of what a lot of kids do. They do drugs at some point. And then you start to add in some of the other societal stuff that's subtle, but it's there for all of our kids these days, which is, pot is medicine. Pot's not medicine. But pot is seen these days as medicine. Medicine is, the connotation with that is that it's somehow healthy. That's somehow good for you. We've legalized it. There's states now in the U.S. that have said this is legal. It's just fine to do this. It's not going to cause you any kind of problems. We joke about it all the time as a counseling staff that we ought to rename pot to just pot, because it's just a little pot. It's just a little pot. It's health food. You might as well eat a bowl of kale. it's the same thing, right? You know, what could possibly go wrong? You know, and that you start to get a little societal attitude along those lines, and it's normal to drink and mess around a little bit in high school, so it doesn't take heavy pointed peer pressure. It's not like they used to do the after school specials when I was a kid, and we used to do DARE, and they would make peer pressure sound terrifying, like someone was going to corner you against the fence and go, hey kid, you're going to smoke some weed or you're in big trouble, you know, and that's not how it works. It's, you hear subtly that these things are okay, that they're acceptable. It makes them approachable. Then you go, for me, I'm the typical way that you start smoking pot. Goalie on my soccer team's the coolest kid on the team, right? We all look up to him. You know, we've been playing together for years, and he says, my big brother's got some pot, anybody want to come smoke it? And this is typical of teenagers. Most of us were already expecting that it was coming at some point. Even if we thought we're never going to do it, but we kind of know it's coming, and kids these days know they're going to be exposed to it. I rarely meet a kid that doesn't have any idea that they're going to be exposed to it. I work with be off subject just for a second, with a coalition in Tempe that is set up to, within the city of Tempe, try to reduce teenage drug use. And we enlist some of the kids that are the furthest from it. Because I talk to kids that use drugs every day, so I hear their perspective. But we enlist some of the kids that are the furthest from it, and they still say, we're exposed to it, we hear about it, we know what's going on in every high school. So they know it's there, whether they're going to participate in any way or not. So now you add in a situation where you go, hey, you want to come be a part of this cool thing. You want to get invited after school where only the cool kids are invited. It's not said that way. It's just, hey, my brother's got some pot. Anybody want to come? Who's going to say no? The one guy who's going to commit social suicide right in that moment is going to say, you know what, no way. I don't think so. I'm not going to go. So we're going to go. You know, and that's what happens. We go over with this guy, we smoke pot. Right? And this is a typical beginning for so many of these kids, is that's how they pick it up, that's how they first get exposed, is from a place like that. And it's peer pressure like that. Not, again, it's not, we don't hear a lot of them that go, I got bullied into it or pushed into it. It's the window opened, it's the right period of time, I stepped into it and I picked up and I used for the first time. So that is a typical beginning for a lot of these kids. What they find a lot of times is that they get an immediate payoff. They go into it, they smoke some pot, they drink some alcohol, they take a pill, whatever it is, and they go, oh, that did a lot right there. All of those feelings, all those things that teenagers are experiencing that are normal, that are not unhealthy in any way, it can fix them right away. All of a sudden, if you go to a party, you've been invited to something, you take a few drinks, and you go, I'm no longer, you know, my tongue isn't fat in my mouth anymore when I try to talk to people. I can talk, I feel confident, I got invited to something that's important, that's outside of school. You know, I can dance in front of people, I can do all these things that were terrifying before I took a drug. So there's a huge payoff, and it meets a teenager where they're at. It meets them at the things that are very important to them during that period of time. It's fun, it's a rush, it's social. You know, you're going to get to be on the inside. Now you speak the secret language. You can be a part of the subculture. You can know what's really happening, and you kind of feel like you're on the inside at that point. And there's this huge payoff happening, and you're going, all right, I feel a little better, a little more confident. And what happens with most of them is you deal with slow progression with teenagers. We don't deal with a lot of teenagers who are, and I'll talk a little bit about this, there's a huge difference between addiction and substance abuse. And generally we deal with a lot of, at Pathway, we deal with a lot of substance abuse because we're doing a lot of early intervention. We're not dealing with 16, 17-year-olds that are drug addicted. We deal with a lot of 16 and 17-year-olds that use drugs. But these are the things that are starting to happen with them as they get a payoff from it. This is where it can affect, another behavior can do the same thing. There's other addictive behaviors where they find something that makes them feel good, kind of meets those needs in a false way, you know, and goes, oh, I feel a little bit better. It's false, but in the moment, there's some instant gratification. Right now, today, it makes me feel better, and it eases some of those pressures and some of that discomfort that I was going through. So you start out with most of them, and they go, I'm not going to do this all the time. I'm going to smoke a little pot here and there, and that's all there's going to be to it. I'm not going to do a bunch of hard drugs. I'm not going to do it during the week. It's going to be every now and then, and it's not going to be an issue. And one of the things that you start to look for is it progresses from there. What happens is you start to put chemicals in your body at all regularly. And I hone in on pot because it's the most approachable one today. People, it used to be everybody started on
alcohol, and you kind of move to pot and then the harder drugs. I deal with a lot of people in counseling that have either never had a drink of alcohol or have had 2 or 3, but they smoke pot on a day-to-day basis. That is, pot and pills are today the approachable way to start. Trade some Adderall, you know, take a few extra ones. My buddy has it. I'll take it to study. These are the most approachable drugs. Oh, you got a Xanax? Where'd you get that? You know, somebody found a Percocet in their parents' medicine cabinet. This is a super common way kids in Arizona end up on drugs. Just to say, any of you see the thing about prescription drugs on TV last week? So you know that there was a big, every station in the state gave 30 minutes of time, and there was this about prescription drugs in the state of Arizona because it's rampant here, and the opiate addiction is crazy. But a lot of them are starting as teenagers because, again, it's made it approachable that it's a medicine. The dentist gives it to you, gives you 30 of them. You only take 2 or 3. So the kid finds out from another kid at some point, well, those have street value at school. I'll be the coolest kid in school if I show up with a bottle of Percocet, you know, and if I can sell them, I can take them, you know. So that was a little off subject, but I'll come back to that because it is important. But these are the things that are approachable, and they start out and they have a very good idea that they're going to go, you know what, I'm not going to end up with a problem. I'm a good kid. I got straight A's. You know, or I play on the sports teams. I'm a musician. We get a ton of kids that have a lot of talent. Most of the kids that we deal with are not your typical, and I'm going to come back to this again later, I'm kind of putting a point here to come back to it, are not what a lot of people think about when they think drug abuser. Of our clients, most of them are your average suburban, go to a high school like Hamilton, have parents that love them. I got Eagle Scouts, and I got full ride scholars from ASU, and I got straight A students coming out of my ears that we work with. So there's not a typical form of what it looks like to end up with a substance abuse problem. It's not, and and I think that is changing a little bit inside of it. It used to be that, you know, the kid who was abused, that had, you know, his parents didn't take good care of him. You know, these are the kids in the poorest neighborhoods. These are the kids with the drug problems. It's everybody. We deal with as many kids from any of the high schools around. So the biggest difference in socioeconomic is kids that live around more money have better drugs. That really is the deal. They have access to more pills and to higher quality drugs, but they don't necessarily have more or less than the other neighborhoods. So, so you're doing this. You're going along, and you're going, I'm not going to do a bunch of really dumb things. You start putting chemicals in. Chemicals start to compromise your decision making immediately. You're now starting to add something that alters your brain, even if it alters it at a smaller level than a certain drug. It doesn't matter what the drug is. One of the difference between marijuana and the other ones, marijuana lasts longer. So it can affect you in your decision making for weeks. Where a pill, you know, if you did some cocaine, it may only be about 48 hours. Now one of them is a way more dangerous immediately drug, right? But they both are going to compromise your decision making process heavily. And so you go, oh, well, that was fun. I'm getting a payoff. I'm hanging around people. I'm going to do it on the weekends, but I'm going to maintain straight A's. You do that for a couple of months, and you go, there's nothing bad happening. And this is typical progression. So why can't I just put a little bit of weekend in my week? You know, why can't we start Thursday night and party a little bit? Or add some alcohol or pop a few pills we haven't tried before, because there's not really any major consequence. And this is being affirmed to them over and over again because there's so many kids doing it. And it's seen as, well, this is pretty normal behavior. It's not that bad. And it starts to progress. And what starts to happen without them even knowing it happens is it starts to grab a hold of you and you don't even feel it. You start repeating this over and over again. You do the drug, and certain things that are supposed to be happening as you grow out of that adolescence, that confidence, that self-esteem that's supposed to be building, it's not happening and you don't know it. You're getting false confidence and self-esteem because you do drugs, right? So you don't learn really simple things like you have a breakup. Your very first breakup, your first love. This is a tremendously emotional thing. You've all had a first love, you know, and you go through that and you lose that love and it's painful and heart-wrenching. So a kid that smokes pot twice a week doesn't feel that the same way. So what does he not know that he's robbed himself of? He's robbed himself of a valuable life lesson like this too shall pass. You're going to go through pain, but you're going to be okay. You're going to come out the other end. But you don't get that lesson. You don't have to develop that coping skill if you do drugs. You just skip it. And so we're not talking about a hardcore everyday drug user here that's, you know, blowing cocaine. talking about the guy who smokes pot a couple of times a week, but now there's a lesson he's just missed. And you start to add up these coping skills that you're supposed to be developing during this time in life, and you just start skipping them. You don't even know that you're skipping them. Most people don't know that they're not developing coping skills, and that the ones that they have are just going into full atrophy, because you don't need them. The chemical will keep you at a basis. So they don't find out a lot of times until they try to stop, until there's the first consequence. Ooh, I didn't do as well on a test as I thought I was going to, and it was because I was stoned, or my parents caught me for the first time, or something bad happened. I know I shouldn't do it. I should try to stop. And they try to stop. They have no idea why. They kind of feel like a mess, and things don't seem to be working right. And they go, oh, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to smoke some more pot. Because what's happening is they're now set up, they don't have emotional coping skills that you're supposed to be learning at this time in life. So this is what it'll do. It will falsely meet the needs of these coping skills for a period of time until you end up in a position where you don't have them. And that's how you end up progressing into a substance abuse problem. Again, I said I'd come back to this. There's different levels of problem. You can be, we used to call it, there's substance abuse, substance dependence, and then substance addiction. That has changed over the past couple of years. Now say substance use disorder. You can say mild, moderate, or severe. So the kid that I just described is the typical one that we work with, and that's the one you most commonly see in high school. You know, you're not going to see a lot of guys with the needle hanging out of their arm, you know, robbing liquor stores in a high school. That doesn't happen very much. But you do get a lot of kids that are leaning on one of these chemicals as a crutch. They have no idea how dependent they're becoming on it. And they're just going, I'm just having fun. I just want to goof off and have fun with my friends, and they have no idea what they're in for until there starts to be more and more consequence over a period of time. So for a moment that I had in the notes for this part of it is the other thing you end up getting if you use drugs, you get unearned highs. And we talk a lot about that with the parents is you go and you smoke pot, you feel good like that. You have to work to pass a test and get an A. There's an earned high in that. Everybody here has had a success. When you have a success, there's an earned, we call it an earned high. And you go, oh, I felt good about myself. I did something that was hard. I practiced for a big game or a test or a big performance or something like that, and you get a payoff from it. Your body, nature gives you all right, that was cool, and you maybe get accolades from family and friends. You can get all of those feelings from a drug. And so you can go, which one am I going to do? Am I going to go back to the drug or the one that I have to work really hard to get? You know, so at the very least, it starts to put people in, I'm not going to be as motivated to work hard when I can just take a shortcut. And it works, it's effective, and I get the same feeling because I'm altering my mind. So I want to stop on that for a second. So I said the other thing that ends up happening is they become emotionally arrested. You start using chemicals at all regularly, and your emotional growth arrests. So we deal with people, we deal with young adults also, and I use them because they're a little more extreme example in this. So sometimes I get kids that are 24, you know, they're a little older. We have a 18 to 26-year-old program. So we get kids that are 24 and they're, you know, been using for years. They're out on their own kind of, you know, they're going to ASU or they finished up at ASU and they're having a hard time getting their first job, and they're asking mom and dad for money and to do things for them. And when parents say no, that's one thing to say is when I say no to the kid, they throw a fit. It's like I'm dealing with a 13-year-old again. What happened? And we tell them that a lot is emotional growth stops when you start using drugs and alcohol really regularly. And this can again happen with other behaviors too, gambling, sex. If you have something real addictive that's how you cope with everything so you don't have to grow, then you'll get stuck where you are emotionally. So then you end up with somebody who's in a 24-year-old's body that's still responding to life like they're 13, you know, and they can't do it, and they end up stuck and they don't know why. That's why you have to kind of work backwards and go, okay, you got some catch up to do, and we do that in treatment. So the other things that end up happening as the problem progresses is you start to cross all of your rearing, the things that you're taught. You know, most kids we ever work with have been taught right from wrong. They have a solid moral compass. They really know what they should be doing. But if you're under foreign management, if you're adding chemicals in all the time, you're not necessarily as likely to do it. Because now you have something to defend more. If you're going to catch me and you're going to take away all my fun and I'm going to see you as mean old parents, now all of a sudden I'm going to, we say avoid the P's, the principals, the parents, and the police. You guys now are the enemy to some degree because you can take away from me the thing that I'm doing to have fun that is totally harmless. You know, it's not doing anything wrong, doesn't affect anybody, it's just me, I don't know why you think it affects you, you know, some of this stuff that they can kind of get into when parents start to confront them. And so they now have something to defend. So now there's reason to lie. And it's not a good reason, but that's how it's sold to themselves. You justify it, and we use the term rational lies. That's how you rationalize poor behavior, right? You tell yourself, this is acceptable because if my mom doesn't understand, because she's from a different generation, so I'm going to lie to her for her sake, right? We're doing it for you, right? That's what really is going to help you as a parent, is if your kid lies to you about something. But they start to tell themselves these things and go, all right, well, I also, I needed $20. You wouldn't give it to me. I'll take $5 off the counter. Those things also start to hurt self-esteem worse, because what was somewhat normal self-esteem, kind of coming in and out as an adolescent, is now been confirmed low self-esteem by poor behavior. You start doing things that you don't feel good about, that you have to lie about, that you have to cover up, and your self-esteem will start to tank for real. Then you will start to become somebody that you can't actually look at in the mirror. You go, oh, I did things that I shouldn't have done. Now I'm somebody who lies to my mother. I wasn't that when I started smoking pot, but now I'm doing that. So this is how these things kind of progress, and they start to cross these lines. And the more of those lines you cross, the tougher it is to come back. The more of those things that you've done, the more you're going to dislike yourself as a teenager. And that they're working at a deficit anyway because of the time of life that they're in. So that it just starts to snowball. And then you feel worse, so what are you going to do? You want to get high more because you feel terrible. And it just starts to pick up steam more and more and more. And that's how it goes into a progression. That's how you move from substance abuse and then over time into dependence and into addiction, or mild, moderate, severe when it comes to substance use disorder. So it just picks up steam over time. It can get worse and worse and worse and less intervened on. There's this common idea, we see it on TV a lot and in society, but people don't get better unless they want help. They have to hit a bottom. This is also, you hear this a ton, and it can really work against parents and teenagers, because oftentimes teenagers, not only have they not hit a bottom, but they are not going to anytime soon. They're not in a position to be in control of enough of their life to hit a bottom. Adult alcoholics and addicts hit bottoms all the time because they're in control of their life, and their lack of control shows through. They can no longer manage a job, a good relationships with their children. They don't take care of themselves, and it starts to show through. Teenagers have parents taking care of them, so it takes longer to show through, for one, and they have a lot more parameter. So we talk a lot about they're creatures of opportunity. Not every teenager can get high every day. They don't have the means or the opportunity to do so. But if they're sitting around thinking about it, going, I can't wait till Friday night, and that's what they think about all week, and that's what gets them through the week, you're already in trouble. And that's unmanageability started to show through for a teenager. It starts to show in things like grades sometimes, that can be give or take. The main place that we see it showing is in familial relationships. You got somebody that is headed down that road to some degree, usually it's starting to cause problems in their family relationships, and they're choosing over time, unless some kids start getting high with a group of kids and they stick with that group because they grew up with them. But a lot of them start to progress and choose different friends over time. And they choose the ones that are a little worse and have a little more access. And what it appears like to them is they're getting to the cooler and cooler parts of getting high. But what's happening is they're actually choosing a lower and lower kind of, other people that will say what they're doing is okay over a period of time. And so start to progress that way. Family relationships I want to go back to. That's the place that we usually suggest that parents first look, is how are your relationships with your kids, and is there any of this stuff going on that you know of, whether there be any lying, are they starting to, the things that they wouldn't have done before they're doing now, that moral compass is starting to change, is look there a little bit, because a lot of times you'll hear a lot of the scary, all kids could be on drugs, run out there and drug test them all and do all this. And I don't encourage that sort of run around and be a cop to your children at all. I say look at the relationship to some degree, and hopefully you're talking about drugs. This is an open discussion to some degree because it is happening in their lives. And say open it up and see if you can get a little bit of a sense of how they feel about it and what they think and how much of this kind of stuff they actually see day to day at school, and if they've seen friends go through it. And look at the relationship. I tell parents this all the time. It says it on that sheet. If you feel that something is wrong, then it probably is. Trust your instincts. If you start to worry at all, sometimes you can miss things. There is definitely, denial is real. It happens, and it makes good sense. Nobody wants their child to not be okay. So it's easy to look past things. But if you're getting a sense that something might not be okay, look into it. You're probably right. And kids want to throw you off the scent. Teenagers are quick to go, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And it may not be drugs, but they don't really have anything going on. So I do encourage that as a general rule, is reach out. Trust your intuition when it comes to your teenagers. So now we talk a little about, so what do they need? What do you do? that a lot of times is also, you get a lot of, with prevention and substance abuse, a lot of times you go to talk and you leave with terrified. Everybody leaves and they go, oh my God, kids are on drugs and this and that. What I want you to leave with, the last thing, is there are things that you can do. The number one thing that parents usually have to work through first before they can do something is start to work through their own guilt. That stops more parents from doing things. They get stuck in, whether it be the emotional blackmail or something, because they're afraid, I've done something to create this. That fear causes parents to stay in denial longer than anything else, because they're afraid they're going to come out and go, did I do something that set my kid up to be this way? Did I love this kid too much? I give too much? I give too little? Did we have a divorce in the family? What went wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I miss along the way that set this up to happen? And that is how parents can torture themselves and go, if I had done different, then my kid wouldn't be doing this. And that can really keep a parent stuck, so that the parent can't get better and move forward. And if the parent can't get better and move forward, the kid cannot get better and move forward. So the first thing that I always say is you have to start with that. You have to, whether it be call somebody that you can talk to about it, a counselor or somebody, and go, here's what I'm concerned about. This is the behavior. This is why I'm afraid to address it. And that's usually a lot of times what's going to get uncovered first is, there's certain things that I think that I've done wrong, or I have all these shortcomings as a parent. It's one of the first things that we cover with parents when we're counseling them. Is a kid using a substance is not a parental shortcoming. This is what we're dealing with today. It's what we've been dealing with for decades in our society here. There's a lot of people with drug problems. You got statistics on there that are just a few that I grabbed from our website, and we gather them in the city of Tempe for the City of Tempe Coalition that I sit on. And we gather these, so a lot of them are related to Tempe, but they go through and you start to read some of that and you go, there's a lot of people on drugs. It's just not, just the most screwed up, odd segment of society. It's everybody. And it's not for lack of parenting. Most of the people that we deal with have been parented and loved and guided and taught. It has been peer pressure, and it has been teenage risky decision making. Then they went, I'm going to try this, and they had no idea what they were getting into. That's usually what's going on. So if the parent can start to look at it that way, then the denial can start to lift a little bit, and they can go, okay, if this isn't me, if this is a problem, if I'm going to look at it like a problem I have to approach, just like if the kid had any other, whether it be a mental health issue, or if you find out your kid had diabetes, you kind of go through, I don't like this, I'm uncomfortable with it, it's scary, I don't want to have to deal with this. But then you do what you do as a parent. You step up and you go, okay, all right, doc, what do we do? What do I have to feed the kid? What do they have to, when does the insulin happen? Do we need a pump? You become an expert on it, right? You start to learn about diabetes and how to treat it as successfully as you can. And that's the same thing that happens with substance abuse. At that point, it becomes your responsibility to learn about it and go, okay, what kind of intervention techniques work? What kind of boundaries and walls, what kind of confrontations can I put in place that will actually get me somewhere? And if you can seek out, if you get past the guilt and the denial a little bit, you can ask for help with that. And there's a ton of help for it. There's a lot of resources out there where people can give you, well, try this or try this. It can be within the school. I know that Rajani has some of that she can help with. We've worked here with Rajani and within Hamilton several times with kids who've needed some help, and their parents have. They need walls. Kids need to know where they stand. So we'll talk a lot of times about doing intervention, and what comes right to mind for parents is stuff they've seen on TV. We're going to sit everybody down in a room, and we're going to sit you down and go, this is your problem, this is what we all see. I do not suggest starting there with teenagers. I suggest that you come up with a basic plan of the behaviors that are acceptable and unacceptable within the house, and you sit down and you have a loving discussion with them about it. But it's very well planned out. That the spouses talk first. If you're a single parent, that you sit down and you find somebody objective to talk it through with, and you sit down and go, here's where we're at with your use. This is why we're concerned about it. This is why it's unacceptable. This is what we'd like to do about it, and we'll give you some options. And one of the things that I believe is critical with teenagers is to let them be a part of it. They need a little bit of power in the intervention. They don't, if you grab them by the ear and you just go throw them in the closest program and go, you're going to go here, they're starting at a disadvantage, period, because they're there only because you put them there, and the second the staff tries to work with them, they're lost. They're fighting this battle of, you're an extension of my mother who threw me here, so I'm not going to give an inch to you. So that kind of intervention, if you have a life-threatening situation, that's all you can do, that can be effective. But generally, actually letting them have some say-so, and here's my concerns. I think that we need to get this attended to, and here's some ways that I am open to attending to it, whether it be some support groups, the counselor at the school, a counseling program. Here are some options that I'm willing to do with you because I'm concerned about you and I love you. And I always push, and I say it over and over again, I'll be a broken record with it, I've become annoying to parents with it. Boundaries have to be loving for them to really work, because otherwise they just regroup. They go, okay, if you want to go to head-to-head long-term with the teenager, it can be a really losing battle for a parent. A lot of times that makes parents mad. Like, no way, I'm going to get this kid to do what I want. And teenagers are tough animals. You might in the end win, but oftentimes it will be at the cost of the relationship. Because you can wrestle with one for years, and you can force certain things, no doubt, but that can get really tough. If it's a loving, communicative, but firm boundary, that's what's needed. We don't wait for teenagers to hit bottoms. We talk about, we help parents bring the bottoms up to them. You don't want to wait until they've been out there using drugs for 5 years and get arrested before you get them some help. You want to go, we're having an issue right now as a family, let's go talk to somebody. The other thing that you can do in that is it makes you a part of it. It's your issue too. It's not just them. It's, I'm going to take you because you're just really being a terrible kid, and I'm going to get you fixed. It's, we're going to go together and we're going to take a look at the problems we have going on in our home and the things that I'm concerned about. And that way everybody's a part of it. It's not just a mandate from mom and dad. And that you're not going to get a happy kid when you do that, but it does tend to work better for sure. Loving intervention, practiced first, that you have some idea of what you want to say, what your concerns are. The other thing that they're very good at doing during intervention is changing the subject. So you need to be laser focused on what it is that you're going to say and what's important and what you want one of the outcomes to be and some of the options, because it's going to be a series of those kind of things. You did this wrong when I was younger. Billy's mom does this. They'll have 100 distractions to get the focus taken off of their behavior. And to focus it on something else. So intervention needs to be very simple and to the point. You don't want to end up in a big, long, hours-long, drawn-out conversation where you're trying to lecture or bring them around on something, because the most usually you're going to get if you do that is to be placated and go, okay, you know what, fine, I get it, Mom, but I'm just going to go do the same thing again later. So this is just we say this to parents of kids who smoke pot a lot, because they feel this way more than any other drug or alcohol. When the kid smokes pot, we get parents coming in and they go, I'm spending hours a week arguing with a 15-year-old that makes no sense, and somehow I'm losing. How did that happen? They're not even saying things that make sense, but I'm walking away feeling like I lost the argument somehow because they're talking in circles around and around and around me. And that's a very common one. So if you got a pot smoker, they can be the most difficult to deal with and intervene on. Be very clear and concise about what the boundary is going to be, what's acceptable and what isn't, and what the options are to do about it. So the other thing that I would say is just to talk about treatment a little bit. There's a lot of there's just a lot of help here in the Valley if you have a teenager that's having problems. There's parental support, which is as important as the stuff for the kids, because it gives you different ways to intervene and ways to interact and communicate with them. There's parent support groups, there's youth support groups, there's intensive outpatient programs, which you just go to in the afternoon. There's residential programs. There's a whole range of treatment that's available. And the treatment, what I suggest is that you find something that meets kids' needs in a different way than drugs. Because if it doesn't meet any of the needs, if you take a kid to your traditional adult type treatment, the kind of stuff you see on TV, and you drop them in a room and they go, I'm so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic, and my wife left me, and my dog died, and and then this happened, and they threw me out of my favorite bar, and this and that. Their eyes will be rolling in the back of their heads so fast, it will not engage them. It has to meet them where they're at. So the things that we make the most important in treatment are meeting those same needs that the drugs and alcohol are meeting, but in a real way. They're going to need social. It has to have other kids that are there, that want to be there. If you put them in the everybody's forced to be here, you could get in some big trouble with that, because they kind of work the system. If you go to the voluntary programs, you have other kids that want to be there, and it provides some of that social. I say this a lot. Kids get off drugs the same way that they get on drugs: peer pressure. And it works just as they start hanging around. They make better friends if they learn that in counseling, if they can find a support group, if they can find some kids that are excited about, I don't do drugs anymore, I'm focused on my life again, I'm going in the right direction. That will pull kids out of it as fast as it'll get them into it. It needs to be fun. If fun is not addressed, it leaves them with, so what do I do for fun now? That's what I've been doing for fun. And if they get a parental answer, I want you to go to the bowling alley with Johnny, and they're going to bristle. Not that can't be fun. I'm not saying you're wrong, but it'll send them into this. I don't want to do what you want me to do, Mom and Dad. Again, you're dealing generally with this group of kids that are using substances. Are generally pretty rebellious anyway. They want to do things their own way a lot. So you're going to get a lot of that. And treatment needs to meet the need for fun, for social, and then give them a chance to get some earned highs and to feel good about themselves and be able to build self-esteem. And that ultimately, in the long run, successful treatment sets a kid up to feel good enough about themselves where they don't want to use anymore. It does not set them up to necessarily have this crutch and go, I'm an addict for life, I'm going to be hanging on, just doing my best not to smoke pot today for the rest of my life. That is not the idea. The idea is that they walk out and they go, I feel good about who and what I am. I know what to do next. I got a direction. I feel good about my family relationships. Those have been worked on. And now I can go out there and kick some butt at life. I feel good about myself. And that's the idea. That's what you want them to have. Kids that feel good about themselves, that have high self-esteem, will not get as much from using drugs and alcohol. This is my awesome diagram I'll show you. So, if this is your baseline emotionally, and this was your kids when they first used drugs, they were in that adolescent time, and both of you, say you went to there and they went to there, to the same spot, they just covered a lot further distance. So good treatment will ought to bring this distance up to here. So even if they end up using something again at some point, they travel the same distance that somebody else would, where they're not going, whoa, that was really fun. Somebody who's here and smokes pot and they cover that distance, they're going to get a lot out of it. Somebody who's right there and they just go there, it's not worth it. It's not worth the consequences at that point. It doesn't do enough for you. So the idea this also goes to prevention. You want to prevent drug and alcohol use. You want that baseline self-esteem to be as high as you can possibly facilitate it being. You cannot control that in your kids. You cannot make them or force self-esteem into them. You can tell them all day that they're worthwhile and loved and all this. That's not going to make them have that perspective on it. But you can do anything that you can to facilitate that. You can pay attention to the things that they care about. You can get interested in the things that they're interested in. You can facilitate in every way getting to know their friends' parents, so that you know as much as you can about what's going on, and you know how to meet them where they're at and help them find things to make them feel good about themselves. So that kind of goes into the prevention part kind of there at the end. I do want to kind of wrap it up. Parent involvement in treatment. If you ever look for counseling, it should be heavily parent involved. One of the first signs we look for, if we get a kid that comes in and says, I don't want you to tell my parents this, and this that we're talking about, and we go, well, we're not going to work with you then. It's not going to work. If we can't work with the whole family, we're not going to get anywhere. So if you do ever seek treatment for any kind of issue, make that a part of it. You want to participate as the parent. You want to be a part of all things that go on. So this I think it references this in the sheet that I gave you, but the other thing is, this kind of goes with the prevention, is it changes huge. Substance use turning into addiction, and I think there's numbers on there because I don't remember them exactly, but you're something like 4 or 5 times more likely to become addicted to something if you use post-age 24, or less likely, I'm sorry, as the brain develops. Full brain development is at 24. If you start using the chemical post that age, the likelihood of you becoming an alcoholic or an addict are much, much lower. It's something like 1 in 10. And it's something, if you start at 14, 15, you're something like 4 in 10. So know that too. Defend your teenagers against this. It is a big deal. If they're ever going to do drugs or drink, you do not want it to be now. You want it to be grown up. Hopefully it doesn't ever happen, but as much as you can attend to that today, do it. As much as it might seem innocuous and, oh, you know, kids do that, they drink a little bit in high school, they smoke a little bit of pot, it isn't. They are playing Russian roulette if they're messing with chemicals with an undeveloped brain. It is dangerous. So I'm going to say that you can always call us. We answer a lot of questions over the phone. We do evaluations at no cost. We come out and speak a lot, schools, churches, anywhere. If we can be a resource for you, please feel free to call me or call Kyle, call anybody in our office, and we will help you in any way we can. And we know a lot of resources, like some of these other youth support groups. We know a lot of really good counselors that do, you know, we do the substance abuse stuff, but we know a lot of counselors that work in the process addiction stuff or anything, you name it, family counseling. We'll have a resource for you. And we're happy to help in any way that we can, and you can just call in, talk to us at any given point in time. So, that's okay. All right, absolutely. Thank you for having me.